Welcome to the Mike Graham election debate. This is the panel. These are the people who are going to be telling you precisely how the election is going to pan out. And I'm going to start introducing them one by one. They have joined us here in the Independent Republic of Mike Graham. They are regular callers. They are regular pundits. They are people in whom we trust. They are people in whom you should trust as well. Somebody from the Daily Express has managed to get in here, and his name is James. Tell us, James, about yourself.
Yes, so I'm a reporter for the Daily Express. I write for the papers as well, and I run a campaign group called the Campaign Against Corbynism, which very much does what it says on the tin.
I'm sure that's very popular. Maya Toosey is next up on the right, our famous Conservative YouTuber. Maya, welcome to the show. We'll be asking you which way you're going to vote soon, but I think you're going to probably tell us Conservative, aren't you?
I'll tell you later.
Thank you very much indeed. Next up, it's Lorraine from Chelmsford. Famously, Lorraine from Chelmsford, who rings the show on a regular basis. Welcome, Lorraine. Pablo, who's from Walthamstow. Pablo, welcome to the Independent Republic of Mike Graham. Julian's here from WELWYN. Is there any point to Jeremy Corbyn, is my question to you?
No, Mike.
No, thank you very much indeed. That's what I like, straight to the point, no messing about. Robin's from Putney. Robin, welcome. You're Mike. A businessman. You are probably one of those people that the Tory party would consider to be from their heartlands in that part of West London. Are you happy with the way things are going at the moment?
Well, not really. I don't have a Conservative candidate in Putney since Justine Greening decided to step down. We have a very unusually named Tixera, and I can't get a surname, who's the Brexit party. But the trouble is that I've got no basis because no one's been round to see me at the moment. And this is the Tory heartland.
Which is quite surprising since everybody has said how desperate they are to get out and meet the voters. I think the last thing they want to do is meet the voters, to be honest, because I think that's going to be a problem. Jill's from London. Jill, welcome to the Independent Republic of Mike Graham. Have you had anybody pop around to see you in your neck of the woods?
Absolutely not, but I'm ready. I'm ready for anyone that wants to turn up on the doorstep, and I think they probably know not to bother.
I think that's the problem, isn't it? Pav's here as well from Coventry. Pav, welcome to the Independent Republic of Mike Graham, a man that's been on the show several times with his various different views. You're a bit of a purist when it comes to the Tory party and their Brexit policy, aren't you?
I am. I take great pride in the fact that I was a Brexiteer back in 2003, long before the debate even came. And I just think, contrary to some of the views expressed, that we need to take stock and we need to just exit so that we take the Remain debate out and then move forward, hopefully as a quite united country, to somewhere where we want to be, which is ideally a free trade agreement with the EU.
Yeah, well, let's see if that can be achieved over the course of this particular debate, because what we're here to do is to change minds, not necessarily of everybody here in the panel, but also changing the minds of people out there watching this, because I think there's a lot of problems at the moment. And Lorraine, I'm going to come back to you in a second, but first I'm going to talk to Maya, who's the Conservative YouTuber, because Maya, in the past few days, we've seen a schism appearing between Brexiteers for the first time, you know, rather than the Remainers, some of whom want a second referendum, some of whom want to just revoke Article 50, some of whom want to just completely forget that the first referendum happened. That would be the Lib Dems, of course, and we'll come back to Joe Swinson later on. But how damaging has Nigel Farage's statement been that this deal is useless, hopeless? Donald Trump has come up behind him and said, you know, we can't make trade with Britain under these circumstances. How damaging has that been to the election hopes of Boris Johnson?
Well, the issue is because we've now created two tribes on the same side. And if one side, for example, the pro-Boris side says, yes, it's damaging, obviously the other tribe, you know, defensive, like, how dare you, and vice versa too. So I think the best way to answer that is not that way. The real answer is, obviously, everything that they're spreading about the way they're interpreting the actual kind of the bullet points of the deal, some of it is right. Like there are some issues that, you know, it applies to the transition period, but there are a lot of things that they're saying is not correct. That they're saying, oh, it's forever, we're going to be tied for it. It's just legally impossible. And so it is a bit of misinformation going around, and that has to be sorted. And we need someone to go out there to clarify, someone kind of in the middle, not by the Boris side, not the Nigel side, a Brexiteer, a group of Brexiteers go in the middle to explain which one's true, which one's not, to get the both sides together.
Well, let me ask you this, Lorraine. I mean, you've got Aaron Banks, right? He's in favour of the deal. You've got the ERG in favour of the deal. You've got Jacob Rees-Mogg in favour of the deal. You've got almost everybody in favour of the deal who wasn't in favour of the Theresa May deal. Why can Nigel Farage not just lump on with that?
I'm getting back to what Maya was just saying. There's a lot of distrust now because over the last 3 years, we've seen it, how corrupt and what liars they all are. I mean, we had from Theresa May, no deal is better than a bad deal. That was the mantra. Brexit means Brexit. And then we had we're leaving on the 29th of March. Who would think that Theresa May would be a blatant liar and she's proven to be.
Well, she's proven that she wasn't necessarily a liar, but she was doing something that couldn't be done. She was trying to prove that she was going to be everybody's friend, and you can't be everybody's friend. And in the end, Boris is now not everybody's friend, and everybody who is on the side of Nigel Farage is saying, why can't he be everybody's friend?
Yeah.
Because the point is that when she went out there, she was offered by Donald Tusk a free trade agreement, a Canada-style free trade agreement. And she said she didn't want it because she wanted a close and special relationship. And then this is where the distrust for myself has come. Why didn't she accept that? Why did she send Michael Fallon out to Brussels in the November, December, after we voted out in the June, to organise, obviously, the Defence Union? And she signed up our military to the Defence Union. So
But
there's an awful lot.
Is it not time though to stop talking about Theresa May and start talking about Boris Johnson? Let me ask you
Yeah, but
guys.
she's taken on his deal, hasn't she?
Well, she likes his deal because, I mean, she wants to at least say that she set the ball in motion. Robin from Putney, I mean, what is it that we have to do to convince everybody that Boris's deal is the only deal in town? Because it's all very well saying, let's have another deal, let's go and negotiate yet again in Brussels for another 9 months, maybe a year, let's try and get a better deal, and if not, let's do some kind of Canada Plus arrangement. You know, we don't want to wait any longer, do we?
No, I don't think so. I think the problem is that we've had so many misinformations and lies from various politicians that obviously when it comes from the top, and Theresa May has walked in and been found out that, you know, she's not been telling the exact truth, and Brexit, as Lorraine was saying, we're now at the point where we want a clean sweep. We need to actually just, as they say on Twitter regularly, drain the swamp. We need to get everyone out, and we need to re-vote people in, and literally just kick-start it again and reboot the whole system. It just, at the moment, we're all scratching our heads because we don't know who to trust and who's telling the truth. Even now, we don't know if Boris is telling the truth. We've had Theresa being found out with the head of the armed forces telling us that she signed us up to our armed forces up to the EU already, and that was done probably 6 or 7 months ago. So it's, you know, where do we start looking? So we have to take stock and step back and say to our politicians, enough. You've been caught out, you've been found out, you need to step up to the mark now, and you need to come and tell us, your constituents, exactly what you're going to do for us. Because we've obviously had all the MPs standing on a no Brexit deal.
Yeah,
a no deal, yeah. And obviously then we've had the turncoats then turn around and almost laugh behind their hands at us and try, and I don't understand why people who haven't been elected to those positions, like Boris Johnson, like Theresa May, the Dominic Greaves of this earth, are actually going over to Brussels and whispering, pouring poison into the ears of the EU commissioners.
It's been quite an extraordinary time. James, let me come back to you because we'll get to your anti-Corbyn campaign a little bit later on. But the thing is, this has been a terrible time for Parliament. It's been one of the most untrustworthy periods, I think, between the people versus Parliament, which is what Boris Johnson has been trying to push as his campaign slogan at some point. But, you know, we've had loads of defections within Parliament. One of the things that was said before this election was finally granted by all the MPs was that there's no point in having an election, it won't solve anything. Well, I'll tell you what it will solve. It will get rid of some people who shouldn't be there, whose people voted them in and who were misled and betrayed by those politicians. And I'm expecting and hoping that there are going to be a lot fewer of those people. What do you reckon? What can you tell us from what you know about which seats are in danger, which kind of famous names may fall and topple on the night of December the 12th?
Yes, I think that's a really good point. I think it's very important that obviously the Parliament is not fully respecting the result of the referendum. There's a huge issue around that. I think that in terms of which seats are actually specifically in danger, there's going to be a lot in the Midlands, there's going to be a lot in kind of the north of England. There's a whole stretch in the southwest of England which are vulnerable to the Lib Dems, Conservative seats vulnerable to Lib Dems. The same is true of quite a lot of their seats in London. In Scotland, I'd expect the SNP to make gains. I think both Labour and the Tories will lose some seats. So the real question is whether the Conservatives can take enough seats former Labour seats in the Midlands and the north of England, and to some extent in South Wales. So leave voting seats to compensate for the losses they're almost certainly going to suffer in London and the South West and Scotland.
Okay, let me come to Julian now from Welwyn. Julian, as far as tactical voting goes, for people within the Tory party, they're obviously going to be facing that from the other side. There's already a Remainer alliance going on where Joe Swinson and Plaid Cymru are going to get into bed with each other. It may well be that it happens in other parts of the country. What are the Tories going to do, and can they make that work?
I think there is a very strong argument to be made for an electoral pact, whether it be, I don't think it will be a formal agreement between the Brexit Party and the Conservatives, but certainly a pact of non-aggression, potentially, where strategically they will pick the constituencies and decide this is likely to be a Brexit Party constituency. And I think that applies to some of the seats up in the north, northeast, going over to the northwest as well. I think if there isn't a really visible pact of non-aggression there, I think it will come down to the voters, and the voters will have to make their own decision about this is the constituency that I'm in. If it is Brexit that I want, or even if it's the Remain that I want, but if it's a Brexit that I want, this way I'm going to vote here will give me the best chance of getting what I want.
Are any of you prepared to vote either for the Tories or for the Brexit Party, regardless of what you want, but more to do with how it works?
Where I live in Chelmsford. Vicky Ford, she is a Europhile. She voted for the withdrawal agreement 3 times and voted down the no deal situation. So you can imagine, I've followed every little move that she's made as a Brexiteer. She was an MEP for years out in Brussels. So, you know, she puts my back up because obviously she's a big Remainer and I'm a Leaver. She's Conservative. Now, generally, I would vote Conservative, but I feel quite resentful that I would give her my vote. So I can imagine how they would feel up north, in the Midlands, in the south of Wales, about giving over their vote as Labour voters to a Conservative. If I'm feeling that way about giving my vote over to remain a Conservative, how do these Labour voters feel?
How's it where you are, Jill, as far as the sort of the situation with your MP? Do you trust your MP? Do you have a good MP? Do you have somebody you want to return to the House?
I think I do have a good MP, even though we're in London. It's a Leave borough, 69.4% Leave. So that's
unusual in London, isn't it?
Yeah, I put that down to a lot of my Friday night pub campaigning, which may be irrelevant. I'm not sure anyone that would listen. And Julia Lopez, who is a relatively new MP, she was first elected in 2017, has been an absolute star. Now, I don't think she'll be campaigning this time. She's on maternity leave. But it is a Tory safe seat. It has been ever since I can remember. So I think we're very well represented by her.
So you're in good order. Pav, you're in the Midlands. There's some talk, as far as I can tell already, of the Tories targeting Tom Watson's seat, and we know that that's going to be an interesting place. But what about people like Anna Soubry, others who are kind of, you know, hoping to get re-elected on an independent ticket, but are probably going to fail miserably? And what are you going to do as far as the voting pattern that you're going to use?
Well, 2 things there, Mike. First of all, although I'm technically from Coventry, I'm actually situated in the Kenilworth Southern ward, which is Jeremy Wright. And I think he epitomises the pragmatism that we need to have. I understand what everybody said, but I think we've got to get to a situation where we abandon our ideological purism and take this from pragmatically. There's many things that we all want or potentially would want, but you've got to be realistic as to what you're going to have. Specifically the Midlands, the point I wanted to make was there's been a lot made of in the last sort of few weeks about the Brexit Party perhaps impacting on the Tory vote. But actually, if in the North and Midlands, if you hear a lot of voices, they're saying, well, as a protest vote or whatever you want to call it, they're prepared to vote for the Brexit Party. So I don't think enough's made of how they could impact the Labour vote. Because I think if the Labour vote collapses on either an alternative vote or apathy, that will let the Tories in by the back door almost. And if you add into that the so-called Cummings Workington Man strategy, this is where I think that things could change. Because the one thing I do believe is what they've managed to do successfully is they've made Boris the epitome of Brexit. Almost personification, and I think that's where they've sort of nullified the Brexit Party. And I know the point's been made across. I think that's why they're comfortable thinking we don't need the Brexit Party, perhaps the way Theresa May might have, because now they've almost subsumed everything to say Boris is the one who's been locked in by various establishment things, whatever. And if you vote for him, you're guaranteed to. And I think that's their mantra, and I think it'll be very successful.
I think that's the problem, isn't it? Pablo, let me come to you, because the Brexit Party talk a good game. They talk about the fact that they could run in every single constituency up and down the country. Nigel Farage has been unveiling finding candidate after candidate after candidate. God knows how many of them, like to put oranges in their mouth and dance around naked in the garden. We'll find that out over time. But the point is, they don't really have a big stick with which to beat the Tories, because they will only, at very best, make probably 5 or maybe 6 seats if they can do that, and then they can get into bed with the Tories afterwards. What's it like where you are in North East London?
Well, in Walthamstow we have still a crisis, so I don't think that there is much of a, of a chance for the Brexit Party to break through there. And yes, I mean in Chingford we have Ian Duncan-Smith, who's struggling a little bit there, but we'll see. What I wanted to say, what I wanted to highlight is that I think that the Brexit Party needs to keep this intransigent position and try to push for like more concessions to be made for them from the Conservatives, because that is the only way that they can kind of make their offer credible. Yet I think that behind the curtains, informally, Nigel Farage is getting some concessions already made. Only today, a spokesperson for Number 10 confirmed that there won't be any extensions to the negotiations next year in 2020. Yes. And
although, of course, the Brexit Party will say, well, they always say that, they would say that. That doesn't mean it's not going to happen.
Yes. Well, now we have the ARG who are, on the side of the government, of the Conservative government. So I guess that they can apply a little bit more pressure. And you have Steve Baker saying that, yes, we will have to come out with a free trade agreement, and that is the main aim of this negotiation going forward.
Yes, and let me come back to you, Maya, because you said it's very important that everybody gets the kind of the fullness of the deal and exactly what it means. Because you've got, on the one hand, you've got Nigel Farage talking through his social media feed, going through it line by line, saying this is wrong, this is bad, this will tie us into this. One of the things, as far as I'm concerned, what Brexit Central has put out, for example, is that the MEPs will cease to exist if that particular withdrawal bill is agreed. So he's wrong to say, is he not, that we're stuck in Europe, because certainly he won't be stuck in Europe, he won't have a job.
No, of course not. The issue here is that when you get emotions involved into something that's supposed to be logical, politics and this sort of stuff, everything goes down. Because when you have one side right now, the Brexit Party people who, I understand that we're all angry, we're all kind of concerned and upset that it hasn't happened, but when it comes to decision making, you can't even do it in business. When you go around and say that it's all the other politicians that you can't trust, it's always them that they lie, as if the Brexit Party are not politicians, and as if they've never lied about anything, or you can always trust them. They're not Jesus. And the other issue is that, for example, when they talk about Boris Johnson, they say, well, we trusted him. He was supposed to deliver. They wanted him to go with no deal. It was always impossible to go with no deal under this parliament. They were always going to be blocking it. That's why he went with a deal, to get the compromise, to get them to vote. Actually, he managed to get them to vote for the deal.
Well, in the final sort of furlong, as it were, before the Oliver Letwin delay.
Exactly.
You know, even Oliver Letwin, who wanted to delay it, said that he was going to vote for it.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting. So technically, whilst I criticised Boris Johnson for using that kind of do or die promise, because how would you know? It was a big risk. Actually, technically, that went well, because he got the deal and he got the votes. But obviously, last minute, no one expected Letwin to.
Do any of you think that Boris should have stuck to his guns and kept going with the withdrawal bill and said to everybody in the House of Commons, why don't we just vote this through and then we can have an election? Because, of course, his position would have been stronger had we left, right? No?
Yeah, I mean, very much so. I mean, I think that the issue was, obviously, called the election saying it's Parliament versus the people because Parliament's blocked him. The issue is Parliament hasn't actually blocked him. I mean, it's semi-blocked him. It was making it very difficult. It was pretty clear that he wasn't going to get the bill unamended. But I still think he should have tried, and I think it would have been much clearer that it's Parliament blocking this and it's Parliament versus the people if he'd done that. If he'd gone straight up against it and done as much as he could rather than calling the election quite as early as he did.
Lorraine?
I'm absolutely glad that he called the election when he did, because I wouldn't have been happy with that withdrawal agreement going through.
So you don't want the withdrawal agreement that Boris has negotiated?
I want to know the truth of I want to know the truth going forward of what that withdrawal agreement means.
It's in the deal.
It's
written.
I do not want...
Not the bullet points we get from like the Bruges Group or like the Nigel Farage social media. It's actually written, and they can interpret it differently, but it's actually legally written, so that doesn't change.
So I want to know where it puts our fishing people
Well, the
you know,
Scottish fisheries people
Yeah, I
actually
know
welcomed
that.
that, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And they said this is a great
Yeah.
first step towards fishing. Now, I don't know that much about fishing. I've been fishing. I once caught some bluefish in Connecticut, in Long Island Sound, but there was a lot of beer drunk, and I don't know much about, you know, big long nets that you throw into the North Sea and come out with about £1 million worth of cod. However, if the fisheries people in Scotland are saying they're happy with the deal, I'm going to go with that.
Well, I know that there's an awful lot of fishing communities right around the coast, around the rest of the UK that aren't happy with the deal, and they're saying that they will not be able to get the rights to our fishing waters again. But the thing is, it's not just the fishing industry that will come up. It will bring back wealth to the fishing communities. You know, if that gets going again, that'll bring jobs for welders, for electricians, for carpenters, for administrators. It will bring the wealth back. Our communities, our fishing communities have been decimated.
Well, where are we going to get the
destroyed.
fishermen from then? If we don't have fishermen now, where are they going to come from?
Well, I want it built back up again.
Well, maybe you could just import a few Spanish fishermen, give them the job of doing the fishing, and let them catch the fish and sell it to us. Oh, well, we're already doing that. I mean, guys, this is the thing. One of the things that I found astonishing over this whole period of time is that we've got people like your next door neighbour. And I'm not going to be in any way disparaging. He might be a bank manager. He might be a milk float driver. He's suddenly now an expert in international trade. And everybody's got a view as to what we should be doing next. And I mean, I don't know much about international trade. What I do know is that the people that I speak to who are involved in business will tell you that trade is done between companies. You know, we've spoken to Lance Foreman frequently, who's a Brexit MEP. There's a salmon business. Most of it he sells to America. He says, you know, whether or not there's a deal between Trump and Johnson does not mean whether he's going to sell any salmon or not. He's selling the salmon.
I was going to say, Mike, I think one of the problems here is economics is a very sort of esoteric world. And what's happened is people have politicised the whole economic debate and fed misinformation through.
Nothing is as it seems.
One of the classic things is people think that you need a deal to trade with another country. We don't have a deal with America. Our trade's worth £189 billion a year. Now, most people don't know that.
Right.
They're obsessed. Yeah, it facilitates it, but it's not essential. Getting back to what you were saying about international trade, and it was ironic because every time Johnson has, since he's come in, he's said he's going to do something, and everybody's completely poo-pooed him and said he's not going to get it done. I thought the biggest irony was we were hearing from politicians, from economists saying he can't, that they're not going to reopen the withdrawal agreement, etc., etc., etc. And yet, if those very people had looked at the way Singapore, which is a much smaller economy than we are, managed the EU debate, particularly at the end when the EU started to say, oh, well, in the event of a problem, let's get jurisdiction here. The Singapore economy and the negotiators basically said, you know what, see you later. Within 6 weeks, it was done. And this was so disingenuous because the people who should know this were either ignorant of it or deliberately masking it. And it goes to the point that's been made that, you know, a basic analogy of what happened with Canada, with Singapore, shows you that the EU do bend at the last minute.
Yes.
But the point is you've got to have that. And this is where I think most of us will agree that whether you think Parliament semi-blocked it or not, to have legislation which effectively emasculates your negotiator, your Prime Minister, where he can't walk away, I don't genuinely think he was gonna. But the point is that to have that in place and give him this deadline, you are basically saying to the EU, here's our, you know, in a legal analogy, here's our defence, rip it to pieces, prosecute. It's just ridiculous.
And when you see the way that they all get along with each other, because let's not forget, I mean, none of us here are politicians, none of us have been politicians, but, you know, when you see Boris Johnson slapping the back of Michel Barnier, Donald Tusk and him having a laugh, you know, all of that kind of nastiness that they thought they were telling us about turns out to be not nasty. I mean, I don't know about you, but if you start calling people horrible names and you have a fight with them, you don't generally go and shake hands with them the very next day, which is what these politicians do. And let me ask you, Julian, I mean, as far as the whole kind of anti-European movement part of the Brexit Party is concerned, I find that a bit distasteful. I've got a lot of time for the Brexit Party. I've got a lot of time for some of the individuals in it. I had Alex Phillips in the studio this week, and she said to me, which I thought was interesting, one of the reasons why they're fielding so many candidates is because under the election laws that we have in this country, basically they will get equal time with the major parties. If they only run in 20 seats, they don't get as much time because they'll be treated as a minor party. And the BBC and ITV and Sky and all of those people will say, well, you're just a small party, so we don't need to pay attention. But if they're fielding 600 candidates, they will get that attention, which I think is what they want. But I don't want to leave Europe with any acrimony particularly. I don't want to be thinking if I travel to France, somehow they'll all be going, oh, look, here come the stinking English, you know, they don't like us. You know, I love Europe and, you know, I don't like the European Union very much, but I don't see that we have to...
Feels like that that mind.
Well, I'm
to be
not sure they
honest.
do, though, because some of the comments that I see on social media from people who are hard Brexiteers, they want to leave. Why should we be friendly? They say things like that. And I mean, I don't know what your experience is talking to people.
Yeah, you come across that on social media, on Twitter and the likes. Absolutely, that is prevalent. I think that's very counterproductive. I think we should be looking to leave on the best terms that we can get. Personally, I am very much in favour of the deal that the Conservatives have negotiated.
Can you convince Lorraine why it's a good deal?
I can try.
Go on.
I can try. I mean, it fits very much in the sort of mould of exit that I was looking for from the outset. It provides us with an idea of the future relationship will be based upon a free trade agreement, and I think that will have great benefits to the UK economy and also to the EU economy as well. I do appreciate the point that we could leave on WTO terms, and we don't have a trade deal with a lot of other countries, but do enormous amounts of trade with them. But that doesn't belittle the point that a free trade agreement will be of huge value to us.
But does it have to be on the what they call it?
Level playing field.
Level playing field.
Well, we don't know if it's going to.
Sorry, just to interject.
Yeah, that's the important thing.
With regards to the political declaration, the wording is very important from a legal point of view, because it's no longer the idea, as it is in many free trade agreements, where it's a level playing field. It's to ensure, I can't remember the exact phrase, but it's to ensure that you don't distort the competition or the competitive edge. That might not sound a lot, again, to us normal people, but with people who negotiate, and some of my background is legal, it is sufficiently divergent away from what May was doing, because it gives you sufficient scope. You can never have 100% in any trade deal or negotiation where you've just got free rein, but there's subtle changes, and I think, just on a personal view, that Johnson has almost said to himself, right, we will have this state of affairs, it means we leave. If I'm still in power, I will then essentially chart this course, and this is where I'm going. And I think that's why a lot of the ERG have decided, because I agree with you, we need a deal, because there'll be so much short-term problems, and we still have to go back to them. Even if we were to leave with a WTO, we can't ignore Europe.
So that's the thing.
I don't think anybody wants to ignore Europe. You know, I love Europe.
Unfortunately, on my channel, sometimes I get comments from people insulting the French or the Germans. That aside, going back to this, actually, the whole point is that people who are now somehow against the deal, but until like 2017-18, no one was against the deal. Even Nigel was in favour of a deal. Like, let's sign a withdrawal agreement, get out. Never complained about it until Theresa May messed it up. The difference between this and that one, the biggest problems people have, one is in terms of being tied to the EU during the transition. And they're afraid that, because they keep hearing that new laws are going to come in. New laws won't be imposed. It's the existing laws until we fade them out. Two is they think it could be permanent, but at the end of the transition, it's up to both sides, and the UK government is going to basically say no. Unless you vote for Corbyn, then obviously, or vote for Nigel, then get Corbyn in, then same thing. They could extend it. But Boris Johnson, if they put in a manifesto, then that we are not going to extend it, that's basically, it will push, it's technically WTO, but technically that will push the EU to come and give us a trade deal.
And I think, just briefly on that, it's very important, because a lot of politicians over the last 3 years have hidden behind this. We didn't sign up this manifesto, we didn't do this. And this goes to the trust element. If he wins a majority of any description, it's very difficult for him to push this narrative. Do you know what? This wasn't in the manifesto. So I think that will be very important. And I think that's where we need to go, to be honest.
And that's why he needs the majority, isn't it? Because if he doesn't have the majority, and if it's stopped if it's stopped happening by the Brexit Party, then Brexit will effectively have been stopped by the Brexit Party, which would be bizarre, wouldn't it?
But my whole point is that there are regions that I don't think the Conservatives will win the Labour vote in, and I think that they should let the Brexit Party stand in those
but
areas.
I'm assuming, and guys, you can tell me what you think about this, that Boris Johnson doesn't want to do a deal with Nigel Farage because of some of the people in the Conservative Party who want a deal and who are willing to go along with leaving the European Union, who would see siding with the Brexit Party as some kind of betrayal of the moderates, and he wants to bring the moderates with him.
I cannot, for whatever reason, see the Brexit Party fielding 600 odd candidates. I know they're talking about it. I think that is an issue, and they have lost the trouble with the backers at the minute. They've lost a very powerful backer with Aaron Banks, exactly. So I just can't see it happening. As sort of an aside point, and we saw this in the 2017 general election, one of the main issues is 6 weeks is a really long time in politics. And the conversation and the narrative changes an awful lot during that 6 weeks. And I think this little sideshow we've got here is really focusing everybody on Brexit. And to a strange degree, I actually think right now it kind of suits the Conservatives and potentially the Brexit Party, because it is keeping this election focused on Brexit. I think Boris Johnson wants and needs a Brexit election.
Yes.
And I think if this election gets fought on other territories, the NHS and other issues, and social care, which happened in 2017, that becomes more of a problem for Boris Johnson. So I do wonder if this is, I won't go to say it's cynically orchestrated, but there is certainly an argument to say that
it actually helps, actually. Yeah, the moment this election becomes like an NHS election or anything else, it's a problem. It has to be a
let's talk
Brexit
about the NHS, because Jeremy Corbyn has a foe amongst the panel here, and he is James from the Daily Express, whose part-time job is to stop Jeremy Corbyn from getting into power. Tell us a little bit about that. What does it do? How does it work? How can you sign up?
Yes, so I mean, we launched a few months ago, and we've been amazed by the response we had. We've had thousands of people getting in touch on social media, emailing. That's quite high profile.
Presumably half of them are in the Labour Party.
So yeah, when I set it up, I kind of assumed it was mainly going to be right wingers.
Yeah.
I assumed it was basically going to be a right wing movement. But what's really surprised me is there's so many ex-Labour Party people and people on the centre left, and I think it's because they've actually had to deal with the Corbynites up close. I mean, they've spent 20 years battling these guys. They know what they're like, and because of that, they know how pernicious they can be. And I still think even amongst British conservatism, I think there's a lot of naivety about just how extreme Jeremy Corbyn is, just how extreme the movement he leads is, and just how damaging a Corbyn-led government would be. And that's why my really big worry is that with the Brexit Party standing every seat, the Brexit Party will split the Brexit vote, which Conservatives are trying to consolidate behind them, obviously. And that will let in a Labour minority government propped up by the SNP and all the Lib Dems.
And also what we're seeing at the moment from people who are comparing data from 2017 to now and how the election campaign was going 6 weeks or so before, it looks very similar. You know, there are very similar sort of signs that Labour could do better than a lot of the pollsters have said. What are you guys getting in the newspaper business? What are you hearing about the polling?
I mean, the issue with the polls is that they vary quite a bit, and they're going up and down quite a lot. I mean, it depends a lot on what polls do you use. And obviously, we know from 2017 that polls are questionable reliability. I mean, the problem with 2017 is the overall polls were fairly accurate, but they got it. People didn't do a very good job of interpreting over the whole country. And I think that because this election is going to be such an unusual election, and we haven't had anything quite like it before, I think it's very hard to predict what's going to happen. So I think it's very unpredictable election. But I think the one problem the Conservatives have is they have no obvious coalition partners. So obviously, there's a reasonable chance of a hung parliament, and Labour can quite clearly do a deal with the SNP, and they've been hinting at it quite obviously, for a second independence referendum in return for propping up a Labour government. They can obviously a deal with the Lib Dems. The only people the Conservatives could work with maybe are the DUP, but A, they haven't got very many MPs, and B, they're very angry about the deal. So the Tories kind of have to win outright, and I think that's a very difficult
One of the
ask.
things that's interesting that's happening, I want to ask you about this, Pablo, because I don't know how many of you care about what's happening in Northern Ireland, or whether you care where the border is, or whether it's in the Irish Sea, or whether it's in Holyhead. But one of the things that's happening apparently in Northern Ireland is that to go up against the DUP, a lot of the other parties are talking about voting and standing independently from each other, so that some of them will stand, like Sinn Féin are talking about standing down in certain seats where the SDLP could take those seats, because basically if Sinn Féin have their seats counted, that can help towards the Conservative Party majority. And obviously at the moment Sinn Féin don't take those seats up. So if that happens, suddenly Boris has got a few extra from Northern Ireland. But I mean, the Northern Irish people are upset, they feel betrayed, some of them anyway. I mean, does that matter to people here, do you think?
Well, I don't see many people really talking about, well, in the Conservative circles at least, talking about having to persuade DUP voters to come back and support the Conservatives. I don't think that's what's happening right now. I believe the Conservatives are just thinking, well, we have to get a majority, an overall majority by ourselves. And well, if I can just go a little bit to the point of Jeremy Corbyn being an extremist, I think that this is something that also needs to be highlighted, because of course with Labour trying to move the election discussion towards the NHS and social services and the welfare state, I think that one of the things that we are missing out is that the people who are ultra-Remainers will try to move Labour towards their conviction of remaining in the EU, but also by this is happening just because of the indecision that Corbyn has been showing in the last few months in doing something about anti-Semitism, in doing something about this democracy-wrecking ultra-Remainer extremists, as I would call them. And this is something that traditional Labour voters should notice and pay attention to. Don't let your party become the vehicle of these extremists, is what I would say.
Yeah. But the thing is, I mean, what they say, people that really are true socialists, likes of George Galloway and his followers, they hate Jeremy Corbyn. They hate the EU. Because
well, they hate the EU. They don't necessarily hate Jeremy Corbyn.
Yeah, they do. The ones that I follow, they don't like Jeremy Corbyn.
Well, traditional lefties shouldn't like the European Union.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
And Jeremy Corbyn deep down doesn't like the European Union.
Well, exactly.
But he's a kind of prisoner, as Boris Johnson says,
but these
of his own party.
all these policies, that's the reason why is these policies that Jeremy Corbyn's saying that they can do, renationalise and give state aid.
250 billion.
And the fact of privatising the NHS, it can't be done, can it, under NHS regulation?
It can't be under the rules, but this is where I think that the deal's interesting, because they've had particular sections put in about competition and state aid during the transition period. But I just briefly wanted to get back to the point James made. One of the fundamental things that I have a problem with is that whichever side of the divide you're on, Corbyn and that whole Corbynism, if we can give it that narrative, it's a specious narrative, because these things have been going around pretty much since the Russian Revolution in different forms, and they've failed spectacularly everywhere. Now, the way people talk to you, they say, oh, it wasn't implemented properly in China, it wasn't implemented. Yeah. Well, again, it's a bit like the sort of Brexit utopia. You can't ever have a utopia, and this was one of the things I was made about Lenin. He realised that you couldn't implement Marxism in the way, and these failed ideas have just been presented to a new generation.
Well, even Lenin didn't fancy it.
Well, he got ill on his bed, but let's not go there. But my point is, it's just
spent a lot of time in Primrose Hill, home of the Champagne Socialists, which is not surprising, perhaps.
But that's the point I'm trying to make is it's just repackaged stuff, and I can't really understand how people are sort of falling for this specious narrative, whatever side you're on, because you just have to do a basic Google search in this day and age to see they haven't really made a success of it anywhere. So why would they make a success here when our economy is service sector post-Thatcher? How are we going to go back to the sort of 40s, 50s and 60s where we were manufacturing?
Well, they've already worked out how to do that, though, right? They're going to ban you from voting once you reach the age of 60, and then they're going to let you vote when you're 16. And despite hopefully that fact that never happens, because people seem to have forgotten that at 60 you've still got at least another 20 or 30 years to work because you can't afford to retire. True. But the bottom line is that there will be a lot of young people who fall for the Corbynist message. I mean, Jill, I don't know whether you've got a lot of young people around where you are, but there is this kind of hope that they have, and they think all Tories are bad. You see this all the time, and I know it's maybe exaggerated by social media, but all Tories bad, old white people, let's all be terribly diverse, and let's all talk about how we can have this wonderful future with our great old, magic grandpa, Jeremy Corbyn. And I mean, it's a myth, isn't it? Should we be frightened of it?
It's absolutely a myth, and I don't really understand where that originated. I think it's been the same throughout many generations, really. It's just whoever, especially if it's the Tories, it probably started with Thatcher, that I remember anyway. But I mean, I remember getting involved in mini school elections when I was 13, and that's when Thatcher was first voted in.
And they got called the Nazi Party, but the Labour Party, I think, for anybody's money, is by far and away nastier now than anything else. But Robin, let me ask you: should the Tories be more frightened, perhaps, of the Lib Dems? Because we've still got a two-party system, we've still got first past the post. You've got Labour heartlands, which now are increasingly in the cities rather than in the rural parts of Britain. But the Lib Dems, if they've got Leave and Remain to choose from in terms of Remain areas where the Tories have got seats, that's where the Tories are going to lose seats, isn't it?
Well, I think the problem with the Lib Dems is they obviously can't do their maths for a start, and judging from what Jo Swinson was saying a couple of weeks ago on one of the many shows she's been on, she's obviously fighting a bit of a losing battle because, again, it's the same. It's a stuck record with her. And we're certainly not getting any clarity from her, it's where do we go from there? If Jo Swinson is telling us straight up that she will revoke any second referendum result, and she'll also revoke Article 50. well, you know, I'm sorry, love. Well, you know, you're not even going to get a look in my life.
Well, you wouldn't have thought so. And also, all of the MPs that they've currently got, Maya, many of them are going to be running in seats that they haven't run in before.
Yep.
They don't have any kind of heritage in. They're hopeful that they might have a chance of winning because it's a Remain area. But this will really be the first time properly that Remain and Leave has become a binary choice for people who vote for about 5 different parties. So how much of an effect is that going to have? For example, are you going to vote for Sam Gyimah in Kensington just because you want to remain in the European Union?
Yep.
Or are you going to vote for the Labour Party because you think they want to remain in the European Union? I think they have a split problem as well.
Well, the funny thing about smaller parties, which we call them protest parties basically, because they don't have a root properly, even the Lib Dems. You know, when the Lib Dems were the Liberal Party, you could respect them, you know, you disagree with them, but you know, they stood for something. But the Lib Dems, it's funny because they always talk about principle and, you know, we are the right ones. But then they take candidates different places that have no relations to. They start agreeing with policies. Sam Gyimah, until like 2 weeks ago, when he was a Tory, was attacking the Lib Dems policy. Chuka Umunna as well. Now they're like, oh, we're always a Lib Dem. There was a picture of Sam Gyimah campaigning with Joe Stinson. He literally dressed like a Lib Dem, like, you know, sandals and like, you know, everything, trousers.
What's going on with those boots she's wearing, by the way?
2 months after he was running to be Tory leader.
Yeah, no, with a suit and a tie. Now it's gone. It's all gone.
And also him talking about the fact that he wanted to be Tory leader only, 2 months ago?
Yeah.
And now he's another one like Chuka Umunna talks about we. And you go, we who? And you mean the Lib Dems, the people that you didn't want to actually fight for 2 weeks ago. Now suddenly you want to be a Lib Dem sort of commissar. It's very bizarre. It's a very bizarre time.
This is leading to a real crisis, potentially of identity in the Liberal Democrats Party. They are getting so many ex-Conservative MPs coming over. I think it is leading to tension internally within their party. I have heard that there are some activists who have heard, in particular, 1 or 2 Conservative MPs have gone over and they've literally said, I'm out, I'm no longer a Liberal Democrat. I think they had an experience with Conservative government in the coalition. It didn't work out very well for them, yet here they are providing a home for so many former Conservative MPs. So it is going to lead to a crisis of identity once the Brexit issue has hopefully been resolved. Where will it lead them in the longer term? And I can't see it lead them in a very good place.
I can't see it leaving anybody in a very good place. But we've got to finish up with the Mike Graham election debate by asking everybody who is on the panel here precisely which way they're going to vote and whether that might change between now and December the 12th. We're going to start, of course, at that end with Julian from WELWYN. Who are you going to vote for?
I am voting Conservative, and there is very little chance that's going to change between now and the election.
Robin from Putney.
Well, it have to be Brexit Party at the moment unless the Conservative Party can actually field a candidate who's worthy of the Putney area.
Okay, Jill?
Conservative, and there is no chance that will change.
Pav?
Conservative unless Dominic Agreed becomes leader somehow by a coup.
In which case we're all in trouble. Pablo?
Well, I don't get to vote because I'm Belgian, but I would say EU citizens have to, defend democracy and respect the referendum of 2016.
You guys have managed without a government for years, haven't you? So
don't
worry about that. Lorraine in Chelmsford.
I'm going to play it by ear. I want to see
so
how that goes.
you're still persuadable?
I am very persuadable. Yeah, I always was. I want there to be more exposure on the left.
Yes.
What the left stands for and the policies they say they're going to bring in regards to all this renationalisation. That needs to be opened up to the people, let them know. And I also want to know the truth of what we're actually getting in this withdrawal agreement and political declaration and where that's going. So I want openness, truth, and I'm going to play it by ear.
Lost as well, you're in the right place for that, the Independent Republic of Mike Graham.
Yeah.
You two at the end are the experts, right? So you don't get to tell me who you're going to vote for. You get to tell me who's going to win the election and by how much.
Mike Graham.
Thank you.
He's going to win by 2. No, I think my view is at the end, it hasn't started yet, but I'm guessing it's Boris and Dominic Cummings. The campaign's going to go well, unless they mess it up. So it's going to be a small majority for the Tories.
Okay.
10,
James,
20.
big enough majority to make it happen?
I'm going to be honest, I'm scared.
You look scared.
And not just about the settings, though. I'm scared about the election outcome. I think that with the Brexit Party standing in every seat, splitting the Brexit vote, I think the Remain vote will start to coalesce around Labour again, despite Jeremy Corbyn obviously personally being a Eurosceptic. That's what happened in 2017. I expect that to happen again. I expect the Lib Dems will somewhat get pushed out. So I think the balance of probabilities, it will be a hung parliament, but with Labour being in a position to form a government with the support of the SNP and the Liberal Democrats.
Well, listen, Christmas is coming.
Sorry about
Christmas is coming. Thank you to all of you for joining me. Thank you to you for watching. And of course, don't forget, the Independent Republican Mike Graham is on every weekday from Monday to Friday, 10 till 1. Don't miss it.